Hello, I'm Larissa Elliott from San Angelo, Texas, Howard College Adult Education and Literacy. I was so happy to be included in the Teaching Skills That Matters learning training that took place in January in Washington, D.C. I'm very excited about Texas and TCAL continuing this training so I could finish it. Today, I will give an overview of TSTM lessons I have implemented in my ESL classes. Today we will look at the TSTM intro lesson I did in my ESL class, a health literacy lesson, an environment lesson, financial literacy lesson, and then survey results that have student feedback, and my experience. The power of skills development. Introduction to teaching skills that matter in the classroom was a beautiful experience with my ESL class. This image is of a couple of students working on a presentation. Some pairs actually did 2 presentations, so they got really used to doing presentations in the class. And this was on, of course, one of the basic 9 skills. And this was a contextualized and integrated approach, not a problem-based or project-based approach. Some student artifacts that really stood out to me was after the presentations, I had them do a poster of things they were good at, skills they were good at, and skills they needed to develop. And this one caught my eye. I just thought it was really, really sweet. And because this person has things they're good at, things they want to develop, and he loves himself. so great. And then in my ITP class, the Internationally Trained Professionals class, I did the introductory lesson for teaching skills that matter. And this was a poster that a pair of students worked on to put images with each skill. This is another couple of images of students working together on presentations. For my health literacy class, the whole class collaborated on access to health, and they made a flyer. I'm going to see if this will open. It will not open, but they made a flyer, English, Spanish, and one in Arabic. That talks about language access under the Civil Rights Act, and that hospitals and medical facilities must provide an interpreter, and some guidelines so that they could share this information with people they know. And one of my students was online, so I wanted to point out that students in person collaborated with the person online to help create this document. And then we did a little bit of Earth Week, a lesson that was presented in a webinar, one of our webinars. And so we did the classroom composting. Students discussed water quality in our area, landfill, and possible air contamination from a local slaughterhouse. One action step they took was learning composting in class to reduce landfill, because our community doesn't do a lot of recycling, only recycle certain things. And then an action step, we actually didn't do an action step, but we made a plan, and that was discussing steps necessary to research possible air contamination and raise awareness from that local slaughterhouse. Then we did the cash flow lesson under financial literacy and talked about money coming in, money going out. In this lesson, I focused on front-loading vocabulary that would lend itself to conversations, because my students had expressed the need to have more conversations in English. And I know that seems like a no-brainer, but in doing these lessons, the problem-based, the project-based, the contextualized and integrated, the students are getting a lot of input, and they're also making a product, but the time just to talk, they were missing that, and that was an element I was leaving out. So I front-loaded this vocabulary so that students would have the vocabulary they needed to have a conversation about money. And then the student survey feedback, and I'm not sure this link will work either. Looks like it's not going to work. So basically, students gave me feedback that they were learning the 9 skills. Overwhelmingly said yes, and that they were learning a lot. And then some of the comments were about having conversations. So my goal and my plan is to build that into lessons, of course, to front load vocabulary so that they have the words they need to have those conversations and do role plays. So final tips and takeaways, I'm more aware of my teaching, my practices, and the student experience than I was before I started TSTM. My students have expressed their awareness of the 9 skills and using them in class, and students have created products that are meaningful and important. I've had one student say how inspired she is and is looking at maybe someday becoming a life coach, or she said, I want to learn, I want to use these skills in a job. Is that possible? And so I said, yes, that is very possible. And continue improving. The things that I want to improve on is build in more conversation per student, expression of need, front load vocabulary, which I've already talked about, and continue to weave in resources, standards, and TSTM practices for a full experience for students, and crosswalk all my resources I use with TSTM to ensure that I'm using all the resources in an effective way. Thank you so much for your attention, and thank you so much for this experience. It is so meaningful.